Hey guys, it's Mike from Two Business Review, and today we're continuing the record prediction series of all 32 teams in the NFL. Finish the NFC East, finish the NFC North. Make sure to go check out those videos in the playlist. And then we began the NFC South with the Falcons and Panthers. If you haven't seen those videos, go watch those as well. Panthers fans might not be as happy because Panthers are not going to have the best season in 2020. But we're going to go to the other side of the NFC South and predict a really good team in 2020, the New Orleans Saints. So make sure you guys are keeping up the support on these videos. It really means a lot. And before we go in and predict game by game their wins and losses for the New Orleans Saints in 2020, let's talk about what the Saints did during the offseason to improve or get worse. So, first off, last year, Drew Brees only played 11 games. He went 8-3 as a starter, and he injured his thumb. That's why he came out. He had a 75% completion percentage, which is pretty solid, and still 3,000 yards passing in only 11 games. So he had a pretty good year. He always does pretty well. So if Drew Brees was 8-3 as a starter, how come the Saints finished 13-3? The Saints finished 13-3 because their positions besides the quarterback are already so talented that Teddy Bridgewater was able to come in and kind of just, he just didn't lose the team games. As long as Teddy Bridgewater came in and played decent enough to win to not lose the game, then the people around him would find a way to win. And Teddy Bridgewater went 5-0, I guess, and the Saints finished 13-3 and first in the NFC South in 2019. And if you look at what the Saints did in the offseason, the Saints didn't do anything really to not improve. They got rid of Bridgewater, but Drew Brees is going to be the starter for the whole year, obviously. And then I can't see too many pieces that they lost that are really going to impact this team drastically, but they did have two key signings. They signed Malcolm Jenkins to a 4-year, $32 million deal. He's a Pro Bowl safety. He thrived in Philly and returns to his former team, the first team that he was drafted by. This is a really good signing. So obviously Malcolm Jenkins is definitely going to help this defense out. But one thing is that he's very opinionated, and so there could be some locker room clashes. We already saw this once with him and Drew Brees talking about some racial topics. So that's all I'm going to talk about that. But Malcolm Jenkins is definitely going to be an impact on this defense week 1. Next up, and debatably the most important signing of the offseason of any team, the Saints inked Emmanuel Sanders to a 2-year, $16 million deal. This is perhaps an even better signing. When you think of the New Orleans Saints, and I say, name some New Orleans Saints wide receivers, you go, bam, Michael Thomas, and then you think, wait, and you blank out. You're not going to be able to name anybody besides Michael Thomas. No, Taysom Hill does not count as a wide receiver. So, this complements Michael Thomas strongly. They desperately needed a wide receiver number 2 the last 2 years, and it's part of the reason that they lose in the playoffs consistently. Michael Thomas had 119 more catches than any other Saints receiver in 2019. That's right. Let me say that again. He had 119 more catches than any other Saints receiver in 2019. So Michael Thomas definitely had a huge workload, and now Emmanuel Sanders is coming in. The only problem is that Sanders is getting somewhat old, and he did suffer some Achilles problems, but he's still going to be a really good fit for the New Orleans Saints in 2020. All right. That's basically all I can find for what the Saints did during the offseason and stuff. But let's just, there's the schedule, and let's just start predicting. So week 1, we have actually a really interesting matchup, Drew Brees versus Tom Brady, to start the season off. This is kind of unfair. I would have liked to see both of the NFC South matchups for the Saints and Bucs later in the season, just because I know that the Saints are going to win this game. Tom Brady, he's going into a completely different scheme. There's no way that him, Gronkowski, Evans, and Godwin, have a repertoire and chemistry right off the bat. We all know that the off-season practice is going to be a lot different because of the coronavirus this year. And I just think the Saints are in a much better position to win this game week 1 of the season. And the New Orleans Saints will start off 1-0. Next up, they play the Las Vegas Raiders in Las Vegas, and I do not think the Raiders are going to be a great team this year. I don't I think Henry Ruggs might be a decent fit for that team, but I definitely think that Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb would have been definitely the right pick at that point in the draft. I don't know why they, kind of went a Hail Mary on Henry Ruggs for the speed threat. He might not be the best receiver in the draft. I don't see the Raiders having a great season. I don't think they're going to be in contention for the 7th seed in the playoffs. And I think that the Saints are definitely going to steamroll the Las Vegas Raiders week 2. Saints start off 2-0. Next up, the Saints play the Green Bay Packers. This time it's in New Orleans, which is actually a huge advantage. It's tough to go into Lambeau Field and win, but the same can be said about the Metrodome. And so it's interesting. We got 2 quarterback controversies kind of. So obviously Drew Brees. So first off, Drew Brees, when he stood up for the flag, he made everybody mad because. So, first off, when he stood up for the flag, there's a group of people who actually approved of it, who were let him speak his opinion, so they were happy. And then there's other people, his teammates and everybody, who thought that he was being racist and unfair. So that's definitely going to impact the locker room dynamic. And then, on top of that, once Drew Brees apologized, the people who, at least at first were happy that he spoke his opinion, they turned on him and they were like, dang, he didn't stick up for what he believed in initially. And so now everybody doesn't like Drew Brees. So he kind of shot himself in the foot there. But I do think that... And then on the other side of things, in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, obviously with the whole Jordan Love thing, he said he might not finish his career in Green Bay. And he says every day that goes by, it seems like it's more and more of a possibility that he leaves Green Bay. So both of these locker rooms might be a little sketchy. But I do believe the Saints win this game at home 3-0. Next up, the Saints traveled to play the Detroit Lions in Detroit. And for anyone who watched my Detroit Lions predictions, you'll know that the Detroit Lions are going to be legit in 2020. The Lions made so many, they have such a good team. A good offense, let me say it that way. We got Kenny Galladay, who, if you look at his stats, he's one of the most underrated receivers in the league. They signed offensive tackle Halapoulivaati Vaitai. They replaced Darius Slay with Desmond Trufant and Jeff Okudah. They drafted a good running back, DeAndre Swift, who had 1,300 rushing yards and 218 receiving yards in college. So, and then honestly, I think Matthew Stafford's one of the better quarterbacks in the league, top 10 in my opinion, if he stays healthy. But so I'm just saying that this Week 4 matchup, especially in Detroit, is no guarantee that the Saints win. But I do believe that since it's early in the season, I think that the Saints have more of an advantage. I think that Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, Emmanuel Sanders, and Drew Brees kind of tops the whole, Lions situation where they got Stafford, Galladay, and then Kerryon Johnson. And then both of these teams' defenses are similar. I think the Saints have a stronger defense overall with Malcolm Jenkins. With the Malcolm Jenkins signing, I do think that the Saints find a way to win this game and they start off 4-0. Next up, we got 2 or 3 easy games, but out of this next 3-game stretch, they're going to lose one of these games to a bad team. And let me tell you which one. So we start off against the Chargers, and I think that the Chargers and Raiders, I have similar expectations for them in the 2020 season. So I do think that the Saints find a way to beat the Chargers, especially in New Orleans. I do like the Justin Herbert draft pick. I think he's similar play style to Phillip Rivers. Chargers' offensive line needs some work, so does their defense. So the Saints get the win there, and they're 5-0. Next up, the team I predicted yesterday, the Carolina Panthers, they have to go to New Orleans. I feel bad for the Panthers. They're going to be one of the worst teams in 2020. I think they're going to have a good offense, but the Panthers' defense is so bad. So bad. They lost so many pieces, Luke Kuechly especially. They literally, the first 7 rounds of their draft were all defensive selections. The Saints are going to steamroll the Panthers and start off 6-0. Things are looking good. Now we got something. This is kind of a debatable thing right here. The Saints play the Chicago Bears in Chicago, and it looks like, what is this, 7 weeks into the season or something? Yeah, 7 weeks in, I guess. And guess what? Mitchell Trubisky is not going to be in for this game, and guess who is? Nick Foles. Now, I believe it was 2018 where Nick Foles had the reins in the playoffs. He's leading a game-winning drive against the Saints in the playoffs. Throws it to Alshon Jeffrey, in New Orleans. Throws it to Alshon. Perfect pass. They're on like the 20-yard line, close to a touchdown. They're in the red zone, basically. Slips through Alshon's hands and is intercepted. And the Saints get the win in the playoffs. Now, if Alshon Jeffrey catches that easy pass, then the Saints lose to Nick Foles in the playoffs in New Orleans. I think Nick Foles, he shows up. I think this could be one of his first starts of the season. Because the way that I predicted this whole thing is that Mitchell Trubisky starts week 1, and then eventually he gets pulled. So I do think that the magic of Nick Foles is going to be there. Allen Robinson reminds me of Alshon Jeffrey, same body type, same catch radius. I do think that Nick Foles and him are going to have a good connection on the offensive side of things. And I think that Khalil Mack maybe puts out a good game right here, maybe 2 or 3 sacks. And the Saints choke against the Bears in Chicago. And this time Nick Foles does it with the Bears and not with the Eagles, but he gets his revenge. And the Saints are 6-1. Next up, they play the Buccaneers the second time in the season. Obviously, they beat them week 1, but this time it's in Tampa Bay, and Tom Brady has finally adapted to his new environment. This is going to be an upset. I think the Buccaneers split games with the Saints in 2020, and I think that Tom Brady, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans, they definitely are going to find a little something. Maybe Gronkowski's a big impact this late in the season. But I do think that the Buccaneers are going to, have one of the most dynamic offenses in the league, especially if their offensive line shows up this year. And I do think they have some decent players on defense, Shaq Barrett, but their defense is definitely the weak point of that team. It's mostly focused on offense. Look for a shootout in week 8, and I think the Buccaneers take this victory, so that's 2 straight losses, 6-2. Next up, we're going to play the San Francisco 49ers, and it's in New Orleans. And I believe the Saints win this game. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to take a step back without Emmanuel Sanders. They obviously lost Matt Breida, but they're getting back Tevin Coleman from injury. So that whole 49ers offense is going to be a little different. George Kittle's definitely going to have another great season. He's one of the best tight ends in the league. And I think the 49ers defense is really strong. They have Jimmy Garoppolo, Richard Sherman. I think the 49ers defense is going to be top 10 in the league. I think their offense takes a step back. I think the Saints find a way to win this game in New Orleans. Next up, the Saints play the Falcons. And is this the first time they play them this season? Let me look. No. Yep, this is the first time they play them this season, and it comes this late, and it comes at home in New Orleans. And we predicted the Falcons earlier, and they lost so many pieces in 2020. Like, out of all the teams in free agency, ripped the Falcons. They lost Devontae Freeman, Desmond Trufant, Vic Beasley, Austin Hooper. They obviously tried to address those losses, but they didn't do the best job. I mean, they added A.J. Terrell in the first round of the draft. They have a decent defense. They have 2 good, maybe one. I mean, they got Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, so think what you want of that wide receiver duo. But that team lost so much. I don't think they're going to be great this year. I think that the Saints are going to beat them, especially in the first one at New Orleans, and the Saints are 8-2. Next up, they play the Denver Broncos in Denver, and this is actually a huge upset potential. So I don't know what Drew Lock is. I don't know what kind of a quarterback he is. You can look at some of his previous starts and say he's good. You can look at his previous starts and say he's bad. I think he might have beaten the Chiefs, honestly, but I don't know if Drew Lock's going to be great. We'll have to see. I know that he's poised to have a breakout season, though. And let me tell you why. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, and KJ Hamler. That's going to be a young, fast wide receiver core. Phillip Lindsay, Melvin Gordon. Really strong running back duo. One of the best running back duos in the league. Especially Melvin Gordon's definitely going to be hungry. Playing in his same division he was already in. He's definitely. I hope he runs for 400 yards against the Chargers, honestly. But so yeah, this is huge upset potential in Denver. But I think that the Saints are definitely going to be favored to win this game, and I think that they will ultimately have a better. I think it's 70% chance that they win, 30% chance they lose. So I'm going to give them the win, and they're 9-2 now. Next up, they play the Falcons the second time. They obviously already beat them in New Orleans. This time it's in Atlanta, and same reasons as before. I think the Falcons lost too much. I think the Saints have one of the best teams in the NFC, and they get the win again, 10-2. Now, this is a 3-game stretch right here where things get sketchy late in the season. 10-2, and they're looking to get the first seed in the NFC, right? They play the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. Then they play the Chiefs, then they play the Vikings. Those are some tough games. So, at Philadelphia, they play my birds, the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I hate when the Eagles play the Saints, regardless of where it is. I always remember that beatdown they gave us in 2018, not in the playoffs. It might have been, I don't know what year it was, actually. But I remember listening to it on the radio, and we always get beat down by the Saints. They beat us in the playoffs as well, and that was a tough loss for us. Like, we should have beaten the Saints with Nick Foles as the quarterback, but Alshon Jeffrey obviously choked and dropped the pass, whatever. I think this could be a playoff matchup, Saints and Eagles, so it could be a glimpse of the playoffs. And I think the Saints come into Lincoln Financial Field and beat the Eagles, unfortunately. And it looks like the Saints are 11-2 at this point. Then they play the Kansas City Chiefs in New Orleans, another strong matchup. This is a coin flip, honestly. I think that the Saints have a better defense, Chiefs have a better offense. The Chiefs can score 60 points a game against bad teams. But against the Saints, I think it's going to be a shootout. Looking for scores like 40-33 in this game, maybe. And I think that the Saints get the win against the Chiefs. That's 2 hard wins straight, and they're 12-2. Next up, they play the Minnesota Vikings in New Orleans. That's 2 straight home games against 2 decent teams, and I think that the Saints get another win. So that 3-game stretch, they play the Eagles, Chiefs, and Vikings, and I have the Saints sweeping all 3 of those teams. Don't know why. I just think that the Saints are going to be one of the best teams in the NFL this year. They got such a good offense, and their defense is going to be stepped up with Malcolm Jenkins. So, yeah, that's 13-2 for the Saints. Should I even predict this final week of the season? Saints at Carolina Panthers. Mark that down as a W. Big win streak to end the season. Saints 14-2. And a quick little disclaimer, that's going to be the best record in the NFL in 2020. 14-2 for the New Orleans Saints. That's 1 win better than last year, and most of that factors into the new additions they have, and they barely lost anything else. 14-2 for the Saints. Next up, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Are the Buccaneers going to have a good enough record to make the playoffs? It's going to be interesting to see. Saints 14-2. Thanks for watching. Make sure you guys show some support, and look for the new video tomorrow.